When Sarah Martinez walked into Manhattan's federal courthouse that morning, she looked like any other grieving daughter seeking justice. A thrift store suit hung loosely on her frame. Her briefcase, held together with duct tape, clutched stories no one expected. Her broken English drew pitying glances from court clerks. What they saw was a working, class woman about to be crushed by corporate America's most ruthless legal machine. What they didn't see, she was about to expose the largest construction cover, up in you as history. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments. We love hearing from our global community. The courtroom ambush. The federal courthouse doors swung open with a heavy thud. Emma stepped into chaos. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Reporters pushed forward, hungry for the story. The David versus Goliath case everyone expected to end in minutes. She walked through the crowd, head high, shoulders back. The media circus parted like water around her small frame. Inside courtroom 7, 300 seats packed tight. Titan Industries had brought their army. 12 lawyers in $1,000 suits, briefcases worth more than most people's cars. They sat at the defense table like kings surveying their kingdom. The whispers started immediately. That's her. She looks like a college student. Where's her lawyer? This is gonna be over fast. Judge Reynolds entered. Everyone rose. The gavel fell with finality. The court calls Emma Catherine Morrison versus Titan Industries Incorporated. Emma stood alone at the plaintiff table. Just her, a single manila folder, and something burning in her chest that felt like justice. She was 5'6", blonde hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders. 9 years old with porcelain skin that had never seen a courtroom's harsh lights before. Her blue eyes held something the lawyers couldn't read. Determination, perhaps, or maybe secrets. The humiliation began swift and merciless. Marcus Webb rose from the defense table. Lead counsel, Harvard Law, 40 years of crushing people like Emma. His Italian shoes clicked against marble floors as he approached the bench. Your Honor, his voice dripped with practiced arrogance. Before we waste the court's valuable time, I motion to dismiss this frivolous lawsuit. The plaintiff clearly lacks proper legal representation. Her documents appear to be homemade. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Camera phones captured every moment of Emma's supposed downfall. The court reporter rolled her eyes and sighed audibly. Even the bailiff smirked. At the defense table, Titan's CEO Jonathan Hayes didn't bother looking up from his phone. To him, Emma was already forgotten. Another nuisance handled by expensive lawyers. Ms. Morrison, Judge Reynolds peered over his glasses. Do you understand the complexity of federal litigation? This isn't small claims court. More snickers from the crowd. Webb's legal team exchanged knowing glances. This was easier than expected. Emma requested permission to cross-examine. Webb objected before she finished speaking. Plaintiff lacks standing and competence. Your Honor. The spectators filmed everything. Social media was already buzzing. Hashtags trending. The amateur lawyer about to get destroyed on live television. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, you know this feeling. Emma was about to show them something they'd never forget. Then something shifted. Emma's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Objection. Your Honor. Counsel is making assumptions about plaintiff's qualifications without foundation. Under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 26, discovery materials must be exchanged regardless of plaintiff's representation status. The laughter stopped. Webb blinked. That wasn't amateur hour language. That was precise and professional. Perfect. Emma continued without missing a beat. Furthermore, in Carpenter versus Morrison Industries, 1987, the Third Circuit ruled that pro-SC plaintiffs retain full rights to examine corporate documents when said documents relate directly to the alleged negligence. Judge Reynolds raised an eyebrow. The case citation was flawless. The application was spot on. Ms. Scott Morrison, the judge leaned forward. Please proceed with your examination request. Emma smiled. The first crack in Titan's armor. Your Honor, I request permission to examine all manufacturing safety reports from Titan Industries, specifically internal communications regarding Model 7, a mining equipment from January through December of last year. Webb shot to his feet. Objection fishing expedition plaintiff has no basis for... Overruled. Judge Reynolds' gavel fell hard. Ms. Morrison has established preliminary grounds. Proceed. The courtroom energy shifted like electricity before a storm. Emma reached into her manila folder. Her movements were deliberate now, confident. She pulled out a plastic badge holder and held it high. Your Honor, I present Exhibit A. My father's work identification from Titan Industries. The badge caught the overhead lights. David Morrison, employee number 77339. Safety inspector, hired January 15th, died September 23rd. Thomas Morrison spent 8 months testing Titan's Model 7, a equipment. He died when that equipment failed catastrophically during routine inspection. Webb was already objecting, but Emma's voice rose above his protests. I also present these internal emails, obtained through legal discovery channels. She held up a thick stack of papers. Webb's face went white. Those emails weren't supposed to exist anymore. Emails that showed Titan Industries knew about the safety defects 3 months before my father's death. Emails discussing cost, cutting measures, emails about hiding test results from federal inspectors. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes exploded again. But this time they weren't mocking Emma. They were documenting something historic. Webb frantically shuffled through his papers. How did she get those emails they'd been deleted, scrubbed, destroyed? Emma's smile grew wider with each word she spoke. The grief-stricken daughter was gone. Standing in her place was something far more dangerous. A prosecutor. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this courtroom. But order was the last thing Emma wanted. She wanted chaos. She wanted panic. She wanted Titan Industries to feel exactly what her father felt in his final moments. Helpless. The billion-dollar legal team was about to discover they weren't facing a grieving daughter. They were facing something that would leave them speechless. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about justice. And Emma Morrison was just getting started. The courthouse steps were slick with morning rain as Emma Parker climbed them one by one. Her blonde hair tucked under a simple gray hood, her worn jeans and faded sweater marking her as ordinary. Just another grieving daughter seeking justice for her father's death. The billion-dollar Titan Industries had no idea what was coming. Their army of lawyers in $1,000 suits, their boardroom confidence, their media spin machine, none of it would matter, because sometimes justice wears the simplest disguise, and sometimes the most powerful weapon is the truth. Before we dive into Emma's incredible journey, we want to connect with our amazing community. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. Are you Team Justice, or have you ever faced a David versus Goliath situation? Let's build this story together. The federal courthouse doors swung open with a weight that seemed to echo through marble corridors. Emma stepped into controlled chaos. Camera flashes erupted like artillery fire. Reporters pressed forward with the hunger of predators, sensing an easy kill. This was the David versus Goliath case everyone expected to end before lunch. She moved through the media circus with quiet grace, each step deliberate, each breath measured. The crowd parted reluctantly, their whispers following her like smoke. Inside courtroom 7, 300 seats filled to capacity. Titan Industries had assembled their empire. 12 attorneys in suits that cost more than most annual salaries. Briefcases worth small fortunes. They dominated the defense table like generals surveying a battlefield they'd already won. The murmurs began immediately, rippling through the gallery like spreading wildfire. That's her. She looks barely out of college. Where's her legal team? This is going to be a massacre. Judge Reynolds entered with the gravity of 40 years on the bench. Everyone rose as one. The gavel fell with the finality of fate itself. The court calls Emma Catherine Parker versus Titan Industries Incorporated. Emma stood alone at the plaintiff table, solitary, defiant, armed with nothing but a single manila folder and something burning in her chest that felt like righteous fury. She stood 5'6", blonde hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders. 20, 9 years old with porcelain skin that had never seen a courtroom's harsh lights before. Her blue eyes held something the lawyers couldn't read. Determination, perhaps. Or maybe secrets that ran deeper than anyone imagined. The humiliation began with surgical precision. Marcus Webb rose from the defense table like a titan awakening, led counsel, Harvard law pedigree, 4 decades of crushing dreams and bearing truth beneath legal technicalities. His Italian leather shoes clicked against marble floors as he approached the bench with the confidence of inevitability. "Your Honor," his voice carried the practiced arrogance of unchallenged power. "Before we waste this distinguished court's valuable time, I motion to dismiss this frivolous lawsuit. The plaintiff clearly lacks proper legal representation. Her documents appear to be, shall we say, homemade." Laughter erupted from the gallery like champagne from a shaken bottle. Camera phones captured every moment of Emma's supposed humiliation. The court reporter rolled her eyes with theatrical disdain. Even the bailiff allowed himself a knowing smirk. At the defense table, Titan CEO Jonathan Hayes remained absorbed in his smartphone screen. To him, Emma was already forgotten. Another insignificant problem handled by expensive solutions? "Miss Sam Parker." Judge Reynolds peered over wire, rimmed glasses that had witnessed countless legal battles. "Do you fully understand the complexity of federal litigation? This courtroom operates under strict procedural rules." More snickers rippled through the crowd. Webb's legal team exchanged glances that spoke of easy victories and billable hours. This was simpler than they'd anticipated. Emma's request to cross, examine witnesses died before it fully formed. Webb objected with the speed of a striking serpent. "Plaintiff lacks both standing and competence. Your Honor." The spectators filmed everything with gleeful anticipation. Social media buzzed with trending hashtags. The amateur lawyer about to be destroyed on live television. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, hit that like button right now. Emma's about to show them something they'll never forget. Then the atmosphere shifted like electricity before a storm. Emma's voice cut through the courthouse noise with surgical precision. "Objection. Your Honor. Opposing counsel makes assumptions about plaintiff's qualifications without evidentiary foundation. Under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 26, discovery materials must be exchanged regardless of plaintiff's representation status." The laughter died instantly, strangled by sudden uncertainty. Webb blinked rapidly. That wasn't amateur language. That was precise, professional, perfectly executed. Emma continued without pause, her confidence building with each syllable. Furthermore, in Carpenter versus Morrison Industries, 1987, the Third Circuit ruled that pro se plaintiffs retain full examination rights when documents relate directly to alleged corporate negligence. Judge Reynolds raised an eyebrow. The case citation was flawless. The legal application was masterful. "Ms. Parker?" The judge leaned forward with newfound interest. "Please proceed with your examination request." Emma smiled for the first time, and something dangerous flickered behind her blue eyes. "Your Honor, I formally request examination of all manufacturing safety reports from Titan Industries, specifically internal communications regarding Model 7, a mining equipment from January through December of the previous year." Webb exploded from his chair like a man possessed. "Objection! This is nothing more than a fishing expedition. Plaintiff has absolutely no legal basis for." "Overruled!" Judge Reynolds' gavel fell with thunderous authority. "Ms. Parker has established sufficient preliminary grounds. You may proceed." The courtroom energy transformed completely, charged with anticipation and growing unease. Emma reached into her worn manila folder with movements that had become deliberate and predatory. She produced a plastic badge holder and raised it high for all to see. "Your Honor, I present Exhibit A, my father's official work identification from Titan Industries." The badge caught fluorescent lights like a beacon of truth. David Parker, employee number 7739, senior safety inspector, hired January 15th, died September 23rd during routine equipment testing. David Parker spent 8 months evaluating Titan's Model 7, a mining equipment. He died when that equipment failed catastrophically during what should have been standard safety inspection. Webb was already objecting frantically, but Emma's voice rose above his protests like a clarion call. I also present these internal company emails, obtained through entirely legal discovery channels. She held up a thick stack of papers that seemed to glow with damning evidence. Webb's face drained of color. Those communications weren't supposed to exist anymore. Emails that definitively proved Titan Industries knew about critical safety defects 3 full months before my father's preventable death. Emails discussing deliberate cost, cutting measures. Emails about systematically hiding test results from federal safety inspectors. The courtroom erupted into pandemonium. Reporters shouted overlapping questions. Camera flashes exploded with renewed intensity. But this time they weren't documenting mockery. They were recording history in the making. Her voice was soft, but her words cut like steel. Each question landed like a precision strike. The confidence of Titan's legal team crumbled, piece by piece, word by word. Drop a fire emoji if you're here for this courtroom takedown. Emma's just getting started, and these corporate bullies have no idea what's coming. Webb frantically shuffled through mountains of legal documents, his hands trembling slightly. How had she obtained those emails they'd been systematically deleted? Professionally scrubbed, completely destroyed. Emma's smile widened with predatory satisfaction. The grieving daughter facade was dissolving, revealing something far more formidable underneath. A prosecutor with nothing left to lose. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel repeatedly, fighting to restore order. Order, I will have order in this courtroom. But order was the last thing Emma wanted. She craved chaos. She demanded panic. She wanted Titan Industries to experience exactly what her father felt in his final, terrifying moments. Completely helpless. The billion-dollar legal team was discovering they weren't facing a simple grieving daughter. They were confronting something that would leave them speechless. Something that would fundamentally change everything they thought they understood about justice. And Emma Parker was just beginning to show them the true meaning of consequences. The truth that changes everything. The silence in courtroom 7 stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Judge Reynolds held a single document in his weathered hands, his expression transformed by what he read. The paper seemed to carry the weight of revelation itself. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge's voice carried across the hushed gallery with ceremonial gravity. I feel compelled to inform this court of the plaintiff's actual credentials. Emma stood motionless at her table, no longer the uncertain daughter they'd mocked just hours before. Ms. Emma Catherine Parker graduated Harvard Law School magna cum laude. She served 5 years as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. Her trial record remains undefeated. 37 cases, 37 convictions. The words hit the courtroom like seismic shocks. Webb's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his prepared objection dying before it reached his lips. The media section erupted into absolute chaos. Reporters shouted questions that crashed into each other like breaking waves. Camera flashes strobed frantically as journalists realized they'd been witnessing theater of the highest order. This wasn't David versus Goliath. This was a master prosecutor dismantling corporate criminals with surgical precision. At the defense table, Titan's legal team huddled in emergency conference. Whispered urgencies passed between them like contagion. Their billion-dollar confidence evaporated like morning mist. She stood there in her simple sweater, hair still damp from morning rain, but everything had changed in the span of a single revelation. The girl next door was gone. In her place stood Emma Parker, Esquire, Harvard's youngest graduate in 50 years. A legal predator who'd been hunting much larger prey than anyone imagined. CEO Jonathan Hayes finally looked up from his phone, his face pale with the first taste of genuine fear. This wasn't going according to any plan his high-priced consultants had prepared. Emma stepped forward to deliver her closing argument, and the transformation was complete. Gone was any pretense of uncertainty. In its place stood a prosecutor who'd spent 5 years putting criminals exactly like Titan Industries behind bars. Your Honor, members of the jury, her voice carried the authority of absolute preparation. What you've witnessed today isn't just about my father's death. It's about a systematic pattern of corporate negligence that spans 5 years and 17 families. She moved across the courtroom floor like a conductor orchestrating justice itself. Each gesture deliberate, each word calculated for maximum impact. These internal memos prove Titan Industries executives knew their Model 7. Equipment was fatally flawed. They knew workers would die. They chose profits over people anyway. Emma produced document after document with the precision of a surgeon, manufacturing reports that had been buried, safety warnings that were ignored, executive emails that revealed the cold calculation behind preventable deaths. David Parker wasn't just my father. He was Titan's employee number 7, 7, 3, 9. A man who trusted his employer to provide safe working conditions. A man who died because corporate executives decided his life was worth less than their quarterly bonuses. Her voice rose, not in anger, but in power. The power of truth, the power of justice, the power of a daughter who refused to let her father's death be forgotten. Webb attempted damage control with desperate objections, but each one fell flat against Emma's methodical destruction of his client's defense. She'd anticipated every move, countered every strategy, prepared for every contingency. 17 other families sit in this courtroom today. Emma gestured toward the gallery where grieving relatives watched with growing hope. 17 other workers who died testing Titan's faulty equipment. 17 other cover-ups. 17 other preventable tragedies. The jury hung on every word. Some wiped away tears. Others stared at the defense table with barely concealed disgust. This isn't about money, Your Honor. This is about accountability. This is about ensuring that corporate criminals understand there are consequences for treating human lives as acceptable losses. Emma's closing argument lasted 47 minutes. When she finished, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even the media had stopped filming, too captivated by the raw power of her presentation. The jury deliberated for exactly 23 minutes, long enough to elect a foreman and fill out paperwork. The verdict was never in doubt. Guilty on all counts. The words echoed through the courthouse like thunder. Guilty of negligent homicide, guilty of criminal conspiracy, guilty of systematic safety violations. $2.4 billion in damages, the largest corporate liability judgment in federal court history. If corporate bullies getting what they deserve gives you chills, smash that subscribe button. Justice just served notice that power has nothing on preparation. The aftermath unfolded with breathtaking speed. CEO Jonathan Hayes was arrested in the courtroom itself, led away in handcuffs as camera flashes documented his fall from corporate grace. Webb's prestigious law firm immediately dropped Titan Industries as a client, distancing themselves from the toxic association. Titan's stock price didn't just fall, it collapsed completely. Trading was suspended within hours as investors fled the sinking ship. A company that had dominated its industry for decades crumbled in the span of a single afternoon. Emma walked toward the courthouse exit as the crowd rose to its feet in spontaneous applause. She moved through the gallery like a conquering hero, shaking hands with the 17 families who'd found justice at last. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of people waited in the late afternoon sunlight. Workers who'd been injured by corporate negligence. Families who'd lost loved ones to preventable accidents. Attorneys who'd spent careers fighting companies like Titan Industries. Emma removed her simple gray hood for the first time that day. Her blonde hair caught the golden light, no longer hidden beneath fabric and false modesty. The transformation was complete and irreversible. Today we established something important. She addressed the crowd with quiet authority. Corporate criminals will be held accountable. Workers' lives have value, and justice doesn't require expensive suits or prestigious law firms. It only requires preparation, dedication, and the courage to fight for what's right. She announced the establishment of the David Parker Foundation, dedicated to providing legal representation for families affected by corporate negligence. The 17 families who'd waited years for justice would help others find the same closure they'd discovered. She walked down those courthouse steps, no longer hiding, no longer grieving alone. The girl who'd climbed them in worn jeans had become the woman who would never let corporate greed go unpunished again. Justice had found its voice, and Emma Parker would make sure the world kept listening. Emma's story reminds us that justice doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in worn jeans and a simple sweater. It carries the weight of loss, but also the sharp edge of preparation. In a world where money often drowns out truth, Emma proved that knowledge, courage, and righteous anger can still move mountains. Her father didn't die in vain. His legacy became her weapon. Her victory became a beacon for every David still facing their Goliath. What did you think of Emma's transformation? Have you ever had to stand your ground when the odds were stacked against you? Share your story in the comments. We're listening. If this tale stirred something in you, like the video, subscribe for more real stories of quiet courage. And remember, never underestimate the power of someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for.